Today we're going to start a new subject. Today's new subject is traffic calming. You can see that written on the slide, so no big surprise there. This is a two-part series, so we've got two lectures coming up on traffic calming, and then we'll have kind of a review session and maybe a little patch up some loose ends on Monday, and that'll be it for the semester this time around. So traffic calming is kind of an interesting piece in design, and personally, I think it ties. It's kind of similar to roundabouts. And so in roundabouts, we're using geometry to enforce good behavior. We use deflection to slow vehicles down so that cars can enter safely and you have enough time to make good decisions as you enter the roundabout, basically. And so that's a geometry enforced behavior. All right, through that. If you don't, we watched some of those clips of the cars jumping over the center islands of the roundabouts because they missed them and they just bounced up over through that. That's what happens if you ignore the geometry, right? So then, and most people don't, and they're much safer then because people are slowing down, and it's an appropriate speed for the human brain to process things quickly enough and make good decisions. For that traffic calming, we do kind of the same thing, and we got some extra tricks thrown in here, but we're using, a lot of times, we're using geometry and a little bit of human behavior, but mostly geometry to slow traffic down. And where would you use traffic calming, right? And so this is not going to be on your major arterials going through your town. You're going to be using traffic calming usually in neighborhoods, and it's almost always by the request of the residents who live there in that neighborhood. And why they request it usually is because it's either a high volume, there's a lot of people cutting through their neighborhood because it's a shortcut, or it's by speeds, and so they're worried about their kids and so forth in the residential neighborhood, and so they'll do traffic calming. Some cities, Portland, Seattle, I believe you actually have to get a survey, or you have to go out and get people to sign that they are in favor of the traffic calming measure. And so you need a fair bit of community support before they'll install them, right? Because they're also disruptive. They're a little bit disruptive to cut through traffic, and they're designed to be so. That's the point, is they're disrupting traffic so that people will choose other routes. And it makes this route slower, and people will go to the faster route, which can handle the traffic better in people's minds. So you actually have to go around with a petition and get it signed by all the residents in the neighborhood near these before a city will install them. So it's kind of an interesting piece of it. So these are these cities who've been doing it the longest, like say Portland and Seattle, were famous for some of the first traffic calming pieces. That they've got this kind of dialed down pretty well, but they're only installed where people want them. And they ensure that by getting this petition signed to start off with. And so we're going to delve into that world today. So this was originally developed off of a presentation that Dave Henkel gave a couple years ago to a class. He came up to visit. Well, this year he can't come visit, and we aren't in class, right? And so far no one has taken me up to do a guest video lecture for you guys, so I'm doing them all. But Dave did say it was fine to use the slides he put together, adapt them a little bit, but they're mostly the slides he put together for you guys to see what this traffic calming looks like for that. Dave, by the way, I have to give a generous plug to CHA, which is a big consulting firm. He's in Indianapolis. He's the vice president there with CHA in Indianapolis. They're right downtown near the Union Station. Well, now he's at home, but he used to be his office right downtown by Union Station. CHA is, Indiana's about as far west as they go, but then they go all the way out to the East Coast. They have a lot of offices in New York, upstate and downstate, as well as Massachusetts area, and so forth, Ohio, all that. So if you're looking for a job in the eastern half of the U.S., I think even Florida, I think they have some places in Florida too, look up CHA. His information, his contact information is at the end, I think, of the next presentation. It was at the end of the original presentation. And he said, put a plug in there for him. He's happy to let us use his slides, but just put a plug in and keep him in mind if you're looking for a job. And this year they weren't able to hire a Valpo grad, but he's been up every fall for the last 3 years and has interviewed some of you students and hired one the first year, made some offers the second year, didn't get anybody, And then this last year, he didn't have a position come open in time to get any of our students, and job market was pretty good, so they went fast through there. So thank you, CHAs. Thank you, Dave Henkel. And we will move on. All right. So what is traffic calming? Why would we want to do traffic calming? When is a good time to do traffic calming? And how? Right. That's what's going to be coming up in the next 2 lectures for that. And we're going to go through each thing at a time. So what is traffic calming? The ITE defines it as a combination of mainly physical measures that reduce the negative effects of motor vehicle use and alter driver behavior, which improves conditions for non-motorized street users. Basically pedestrians and bicyclists, right, on that. And that's exactly what I was trying to, I guess, point out earlier, is that we're using geometry, we're using a physical design to promote a better behavior out of drivers. And I hadn't thought about this part. IT is right? And then why are we doing it? Is we're helping out the non-motorized street users. Also, residents usually like it. All right. One of the problems with a lot of high traffic cut-throughs is it's loud, right? It's fairly noisy. Until the day arrives when we're all driving electric cars, it's a noisy thing to have traffic on your street. So that's one reason sometimes a neighborhood will vote to have these installed, is to cut down on that traffic. It does get quieter, right? It really does. For there. So why traffic calming, right? According to Mahatma Gandhi, there's more to life than increasing its speed, right? So there's more things important than just keeping things moving fast, or in the traffic world in high volume, right? For there. So pedestrian fatalities, this is from 2015. 76% of pedestrian fatalities are in urban areas. Yes, probably because that's where most people live, right? 72% are at non-intersection locations. So they were not crossing at where there was an intersection. They're walking along the road, they get hit, or they're cutting across mid-block. So those are very dangerous locations. So mid-block crossings, just FYI, and the safety side of things, is a dangerous spot to cross the road. So always try to cross where there is a road, even if there's not a 4-way stop or something. If it's near an intersection, it's a better place to cross. More likely, a driver is going to expect you there more. So that's going to be there. And most of these fatalities happen just in average everyday weather. So it wasn't bad visibility. It wasn't, snowing really hard and you couldn't see the person in whiteout conditions or something like that. It's just normal weather, right? And that's where most of these fatalities are, right? And the studies have shown that if we put speed humps, we're going to talk about what those are. You may already know, but a speed hump is one of our traffic calming devices that we're in neighborhoods that have those. It's 50% less odds of a child being injured. That's a good thing, right? If you can drop child injuries from, maybe that's just one source of injury, but it's dropping that by 50%. Very good thing, right, for that. Streets of traffic calming have a 39% decrease overall in crash frequency. It's Portland, Oregon say that. Again, Portland has a really strong traffic calming system in place. And again, Seattle was the other kind of famous one in the U.S. for having really good traffic calming. And since the 70s, right? Since 1970s. They've been doing this a long time and they're really good at it. All right, for there. So why traffic calming? What's our primary objectives? What do we want to achieve with traffic calming? Right, so there. So one is we want to reduce vehicle speed. We want to reduce the volumes, which is connected to reducing the people cutting through our neighborhood to get from one busier road to another busier road. Especially in these traditional cities where you got the grid pattern, kind of like downtown Valpo, near downtown Valpo, right? It's easy just to go one block over and you still got a straight road all the way through. Like think of Lincoln Way. You go one block either side. Yeah, you could get through on that road in the side street. So if Lincoln Way seems too busy to you, you can take one of these side roads. That's cut through traffic. And then if you lived on those side roads, you wouldn't really like all the traffic off Lincoln Way coming over and driving through your neighborhood. All right. We reduce the frequency and severity of collisions, reducing pedestrian and vehicle conflicts, and that obviously reduces the number of fatalities. For there, we need less police enforcement. Right. So that if you don't build something that makes people slow down or take a different route, the other option is to have the police sit out there and give out tickets. And that's doesn't work well. It's a very poor system for that. Number one is there's not enough police to go around, right, for that. It also, a lot of times, it makes the street environment, how pretty it is, much better. Right? It really enhances that environment. You have planters, you have more trees often because you put trees in some of these chicanes and these mini roundabouts. And so forth. And it improves access for all modes, which is, bikes and pedestrians have a better access along the road. A very busy vehicle road with lots of cars and fairly high speeds, bicyclists and pedestrians don't feel safe near that. Maybe if it's signalized, you might feel safe walking on the sidewalk, but bicyclists will often avoid those roads. If you can lower that speeds and the number of cars, those other modes feel more comfortable, and so more people will use that. Right, for that. History of it, the first implementation, I guess, was Montclair, New Jersey. I didn't know that, right? 1930s. Seattle then kicked in, Seattle and Berkeley in the 1970s for that, with these traffic calming measures. Federal Highway Administration started a traffic calming toolbox that came out in the 1990s. That's when it kind of caught on. I remember doing an article. I used to work at a highway extension office. They sent out information about improving your roads and highways to different government agencies. In the late 90s, I went to Seattle and talked to people and did some interviews up there for one of our articles on that. I think it was 99 actually, for that. And it wasn't too long after the traffic calming toolbox came out. This got to be kind of an interesting piece. More cities here in Indiana were interested in looking at that. This kind of morphed into Complete Streets, which was, it isn't just about cars. Complete Streets policies came in and it said there's a lot of other users for these roads than just cars. So let's keep everybody in mind as we go through that. The new thing is this Road to Zero, which is zero fatalities. That's a lot of cities have that as their goal now. And they call it Vision Zero sometimes, or Road to Zero. That's become the new catchphrase with a lot of government agencies to reduce the number of fatalities on their roads and improve safety for that. And these help out a lot in it. For that, here's in Seattle. This is a very classic traffic calming piece. These are mini roundabouts. They don't operate like the roundabouts we talked about. They definitely don't operate like that. They don't have those. They don't have the flare, so to speak. They don't have all the yield points and all that. And they're definitely not for handling traffic smoothly and at higher volumes and efficiently. Right, they literally just cut you off from going straight through. Right, if you're picking up speed and go right through that or this way, right, that's what the mini roundabout is for. And a lot of them in Seattle, the ones I visited when I was out there, they're small. They're actually just made out of concrete, like a dome, and the fire truck will just drive right over the top of them if they wanted to turn. That's one problem in these tighter streets. They didn't widen, they didn't buy the houses on the corners to make this a full-sized roundabout, like a single lane roundabout. They just basically took an exact normal intersection and dropped a circle in the middle of it and told you couldn't drive through that, right? Now, the slightly bigger ones will have a tree and sometimes signs in the middle. And then the fire trucks say, well, we just drive on the left. We just go that way if we have to turn because we can't get our truck to go around the outside. Right? It's too narrow. This is a cutoff, and this is in traffic calming. Again, you can't drive straight through. So if the roundabout didn't slow you down enough, the mini roundabout, then we're just going to cut that road off. You just can't go straight through. And you can walk this way and get across just fine. And there's usually a cut through here for your bicycle. You can bicycle through it, but cars can't. And they're perfectly designed for that through there. Here's another one where you can turn right and at least can go that way, but you can't go straight. So kind of a variation on that. Here's a bump out, and that is if it's at an intersection, we call them a bump out quite often. If it restricts it so much that you can only have one-way flow at a time, then we call it a chicane. And so, but a lot of times chicanes are more mid-block, and only one person can fit through there at a time. Here's another one up here, and that obviously slows everybody down, right? You're gonna have to wait your turn to go through the chicane. Through that. So that was one of the interesting things I saw in Seattle back in the day. I hadn't seen anywhere else is a chicane. Now, some of these things don't work as well in a climate with a lot of snow. So keep that in mind. A chicane in particular could be a little harder to plow around. So you got to make sure you're context sensitive, which is you remember the plow drivers coming in the winter. Right. One of the reasons that we want to drop speeds to reduce fatalities of pedestrians is because how fast a car is going when they hit the pedestrian it's almost a mappable direct relationship. You can see it right here of what the likelihood of that pedestrian dying is. All right. So risk of severe injury, if you're going over, I think it's about 45 miles per hour, almost, you've got a 90+% chance of dying if you get hit by a car going 45 or more, right? You drop down to a car that's only going 25 and it's only a 25% chance of dying only. That's still bad, right? But just there's a huge change based on the speed of the car, right? This one's severe injury. This is risk of death over here. So again, sorry, I had the wrong side. For there, still at 50 miles per hour, look, you've got a 75% chance of death. At 45, you've got a 90% chance of a serious injury. Right? Neither one's good for that. And this is a fairly well understood relationship we talk about quite a bit in the safety side of transportation is if we can keep a car going slow, it's much better for pedestrians. Look, at 25 miles per hour, the risk of death is what? This is around 15%, somewhere in there. I mean, even a little bit less than that. Right. Not good, but way better than as the car goes faster. So reducing the vehicle speed is super important in saving lives in pedestrian accidents like that. All right. Things that relate, I guess, and this is a really kind of not great looking picture here. We should find a better figure for that is how width of the road affects speed of the vehicles, right? So here's vehicle speeds, here's the width of the road. And at 30 feet wide, then speeds are a little bit less than 35 miles per hour. If you go up to 35 feet wide, people are going to go 3 or 4 miles per hour faster on average because it's wider. And that's a psychological effect largely, right? The road can be perfectly fine at 30 feet wide, very smooth, very nice, all that. But but you feel a little closed in, right? If it's a little bit wider, a little more open, you feel safer and you're going to drive a little faster. This is, if you remember back to intro, we talked about levels of service on freeways and multi-lane roads, right? And flashback there, hopefully a good flashback, not a bad flashback. That the lane width had an effect on the vehicle speed and what our free flow speed was. So a 12-foot wide lane would be standard, right? If you drop down to 11, then the free flow speed drops, right? And we call that a base condition, and we drop below the base condition then if we're going down to a 11-foot lane. A 10-foot lane has a really big effect on vehicle speed. It's that wide open feeling. If a driver feels like they're in a wide open space, they're going to drive faster. They feel like it's safer to drive faster. They can see farther. They got room to wiggle with their car and change lanes and things like that. It leads right into speed. Yeah, so that's going to become a key factor in some of these traffic calming things. There's some foreshadowing for you. Why do you need to know that? Well, I'll tell you in a minute why you need to know that. Here's one from Longmont, Colorado, relating street width to the injury accident rate. All right, for there. So this is from curb face to curb face, right? And yeah, a lot of roads are in this 30-foot range and up to 36, like this. And so you can see the difference in narrowing from 36 down to about a 29 foot, and that the injury accident rates dropped quite drastically. We've dropped about 40%, by the injury rate just by narrowing the road, right? So that's pretty interesting, right, for that. And this kind of a joke cartoon, right? Once your streets improve, curb them right here. So as engineers, we often widen the road. Isn't that always seems like what we do is we widen the road, we add more lanes into it. And the dog is going nuts over here, sorry. We widen the road, and that seems to be what we're always doing, and we literally can get close to a house, or pretty close, right? You're allowed to get within 5 feet of a house to buy right of way. It's not good, but you're allowed to get that close. If you're closer than 5 feet, the federal rules require you to offer to purchase the house. No, the owner doesn't have to take it, but you have to offer to buy it if you're 5 feet or less. But you could be 6 feet from the house, and sorry, homeowner, we'll pay you for the property that we took, but we can be that close. So that's kind of the old school way. We were always widening, always getting closer to houses, always taking out trees and grass, and that led to that excessive width, and that is was affecting them, crash rates. Vehicle speeds went up, and then pedestrian fatalities and so forth also, matched into that and went up too. Block length also is important. So this is that traditional grid neighborhood blocks like this, and so block length makes a difference in that. The further is between blocks, here's the how far it is between intersecting roads, right? The longer these blocks are, there's nothing to slow people down. There's no stop signs. There's no, they're not even cautious because there's no intersection coming up. The speeds also go up. So long blocks, wide roads, increase speeds. And that's bad because higher speeds, more likely to injure pedestrians and more likely to kill pedestrians, right, for that. High traffic volume is another condition that we would want to use traffic calming for. Right? So high traffic volume is just a lot of people cutting through your neighborhood, right? And so this is classic, right? It's not safe to let these kids walk to school because there's too many cars there. So now we're going to drive them, which makes everything worse, right? And if you've been near a junior high school and elementary school lately in the last 10 years, when during drop off and pickup time, there is a ton of traffic that literally 30 years ago was not there. People did not drive their kids to and from school and drop them off. And it's become a real problem. The county I was working for had a middle school they built out in the country. Who knows? Cheap land, I guess, is why. And they had just this like a quarter-mile traffic backup of people on the side. It's just a little two-lane county road where they built this school, and there's just people waiting to pick up their kids or dropping them off, waiting to drop them off in the morning, waiting to pick them up in the afternoon. And yeah, for 15 minutes in the morning, 15 minutes in the afternoon, there was a real traffic problem out there for that. So we had to go out and study it, and it just disperses really quickly. All right, we filmed it one afternoon. I should show that video. We filmed it one afternoon and because we were getting complaints about it all the time. And yes, it was restricting traffic on the main county road. Well, the main county road is only 45 miles per hour and it's 22 feet wide. But it's a real county road. But it was so short. And well, there's really no point in building anything because it doesn't meet any warrants for an improvement here because it's such a short duration, and we know exactly when it is. This one school days during these times. So we said no to help that out. But this has become a real big problem around schools. Even my little town here, the elementary has 400 kids in it. I think they have a heck of a traffic problem, and backing up into the neighborhood around the school through that. Traffic calming is not putting up all-way stop signs, right? Elected officials love to think that, hey, we'll just put up a four-way stop and that's going to slow things down, right? When residents come and complain, that's, elected officials, that's almost always their first answer. Oh, we'll just put up stop signs. And I don't remember how many times I had to tell them it is not. Traffic calming is not a four-way stop. What we find is it has no effect on speed. I don't know why it shifted over to the side like that. It has no effect on the volume, right? People are in between the two stop signs, right? If you put up a bunch of four-way stops, people are going to actually go a little bit faster. It usually makes it actually worse because they're trying to make up time. They were annoyed you made them stop, and now they're going to make up time. Best case scenario, they're just back up to their normal speed in between the two intersections, right? They have four-way stops. It does not help. And they aren't going to change their route because of the stop sign for that. They're going to keep using it. And what it does is if you keep throwing these up where they weren't needed and weren't warranted, people just start ignoring them. They're going to roll through these stop signs. They don't care. They know they were just put up to try to slow them down. And by gosh, they're not. They're just going to roll through them. And so it kind of breeds disrespect of signs in general. So that's in any case, be careful not to put too many signs up. It doesn't matter if it's a stop or what. We try to limit the number of signs we use so that when you see one, it really means something. Right? It's the "don't cry wolf" thing, right? If we throw up a curve warning sign, there had better be a pretty sharp curve coming so that you believe the next sign you see after that. So keep that in mind for there. And this non-compliance at stop signs, people rolling through the stop, not really paying attention, doing a rolling right turn, that can be more dangerous because people could be in the crosswalk. And if drivers aren't paying attention and they're in a hurry and they're mad about having to stop, particularly the turning vehicles, especially the right turn, can be very dangerous for pedestrians. If they're rolling through it, driver may be looking left to see someone's coming and not looking at the crosswalk where there's a pedestrian. So they can be more dangerous for that too. Other traffic calming techniques, we've got passive controls, which are you aren't forced to change your behavior, right? So it's advising people. This is a passive control. We've got a speed limit sign that's telling you what your speed is. Obviously, this person didn't care what the speed limit was and didn't care that that everyone knows how fast they're going, right? And honestly, this was a big thing 5-6 years ago. You could get these radar LED ones attached to your sign, and I've known city of Mishawaka people asked for it on Main Street because it's a residential neighborhood and they don't want it to be 35 miles per hour like every other part of that road is, so they want it to be 30. Well, then everyone's speeding. Well, I wonder why. And to put these signs up, it doesn't help, right? At first it does. Like, oh my gosh, they know how fast I'm going. You know what? This is not a cop. You're not going to get a ticket. And I think people, after a few months, they figure that out. Right. Psychological controls is we freak you out enough to make you slow down. Right. And that's what this is. This is zigzag striping on the lane line, in this case, and on the edges. This is really popular in England. If you ever visit London and so forth in England, they'll use these right before a crosswalk, just like this one is. Right. This weirdness, people are like, oh my gosh, something's different. I'm slowing down. That's a psychological control. It works. There's lots of studies. This works. That zigzag pattern, they're not used to it. Now, I wouldn't want to be the guy striping this because that's a lot of work. but it works. Psychologically, it really does make people slow down and get better. And then finally, we have physical controls, which is we actually rebuild the road to make sure you can't speed, or if you do, you're going to hurt your car or you in the car. And that's a physical control. We'll go through each one of those things today. I think psychological and physical we do next time. Today we're going to finish out with doing the passive controls, which is advising people. The other way to look at traffic calming is, what are you trying to achieve, right? If we could be trying to achieve speed reduction, or we could be trying to achieve fewer vehicles on the road going through this area. That's volume reduction. Some things do both. Other things are better at some things than others. So speed reduction is we narrow the lanes. We use edge striping. We put some medians, right? Those channelizing islands or divisional islands are really good at making people feel like the road's narrower, right? And on-street parking, having those cars next to you on the side, makes people slow down. It narrows how wide you think the road is. And well, it literally does as well. But it gives you a closed-in feeling, and you'll slow down. Most drivers will. We'll say that. Chokers and bump outs, we talked about that as well, right? It's a slight deflection in the side of the road, and so that's going to make people slow down. Vertical deflection, speed humps, speed tables, raised intersections. A speed hump is a shorter piece, right? That's kind of the classic speed bump. And nowadays we call them a hump, and we make them a little bit wider, so you can go. Some of those old ones, you could literally just like 5 miles per hour to go. We don't do that anymore. We make them a speed hump, and it's more like a 15 mile per hour speed hump. A speed table is a raised spot, usually like where a crosswalk comes across. The entire crosswalk is raised, and so you'll have a raised section coming up to it, and then you cross and then back over. And then you can do the entire intersection. You can raise the entire intersection. So as you come up to it near the stop bar, it bumps up 4 inches or so, usually concrete. And then through the center of the intersection, it's higher. Well, you can't blast through that intersection at speed. Right? This is exactly what I didn't want you to do when we were designing signalized intersections in a rural setting, right? On the road. We wanted to make them as smooth as possible. Remember that flat plane section? It's often a tilted plane. So it's uniform all the way across. And to slow people down, you do vertical deflection. You raise that entire intersection. So you can't just blast through like that. Also, speed reduction, pedestrian notification. You have signage. You have flashing beacons. And you've got the pedestrian hybrid beacon. and we'll show pictures of those coming up. So that's warning people there's pedestrians. Sometimes people will slow down. Now the active ones, these are active, people will slow down for. Normally, horizontal deflection is making people curve, which is kind of how roundabouts work. Well, there it is. Roundabouts. A chicane is making you swap sides of the road, and it introduces deflection. For that, in a neighborhood circle is what I was calling a mini roundabout. It's the circles in the center of the city streets, like that. Volume reduction, that's closing that whole road off, right? We looked at that one little chart before, and if you just don't allow through traffic, that will reduce your volume, right? Either by the full closure or only allowing one direction after a certain point, the half median for that. Diverters, which is just kind of what it says. You're diverting traffic off of it and pushing them onto the side roads through there. Barrier medians, and so you can't cross the median. You can only go one direction, so you can't come out of the driveways and go both directions. For that, a forced turn island, so a median U-turn intersections, J-turns and R-cut intersections. These are on a little bit bigger roads. So Michigan's famous for the J-turn. You can't turn left at a certain road. You have to go past it and come back and do a U-turn in the median and come back and then make, at that point, a right turn to get to the other side of the road. Originally, it would have been a left turn for you. And so that will reduce volume. People, oh, this is annoying. I'm not going to take that road because I don't like that. Have to do all that. Right. So that's this kind of your selected tools that you can use for either one, for both speed reduction and volume reduction. So, okay, if you know you want to do speed reduction, you can come through here and pick something off the chart. Same with volume reduction. Right. So passive traffic calming methods. Again, this is nothing built, basically. Maybe some signs, okay. But you're not changing the infrastructure, really. And so police enforcement's one of them. And we used to get calls at the county about people speeding in our subdivision, and that you need to change the speed limit to 20 miles per hour because it's 30 now, and that will fix it. I'm like, that's not going to fix it. I can, yeah. Tell you lots of stories about no one pays any attention to signs, and so changing the speed limit sign is completely ineffective. The only way to effectively get people to slow down is to enforce it. You have to have the cop there, and so we tell them, you need to call the sheriff's department, right? And the sheriff won't come out. That's been my experience. Almost never, but that's what will slow down. If people see cops there, they're going to slow down. And so police enforcement, it does really work. Signs don't work at all, in my opinion, to maintain lower speeds for that. And so advantages, it's effective. It really is. If people see a cop, they're going to slow down. You can see it in the brake lights come on there sometimes on the interstate. For that, it's easy to implement, right? The cops just have to pull up. That's all it takes, right? It's only temporary. It's really a temporary, right? I remember on last time, I think it was on the interstate. We go by some cops. Everyone slows down, way down. Literally like a mile past, everyone's back up to speeding through that. The disadvantage, it costs money because you got to have policemen aren't cheap, right? The vehicle is expensive, their time is expensive, and they could be doing something else. Is really what that comes down to. And that's what they'll tell you is. They don't even enforce in Indiana. They rarely enforce speeding much anymore because they said, well, it's taking me away from other important things, which I'm not sure what those other important things are. Solving crime and catching murderers is what they'll tell you. I don't think they do a lot of that personally, but I think they hang around their office a lot. At least that was my experience working in the county. So that's the downsides of that. Sorry for the opinions expressed therein. Those were my personal opinions and not the opinions of Valparaiso. So, also speed monitoring signs and trailers. They were proven effective. It used to be these little trailers you'd pull out and people would call you up. Hey, can you bring the trailer out? I need to reduce speeds here. They work briefly. It's really temporary for that. It makes people feel good. That the signs we put up in Mishawaka, I didn't put up, but the city did there on Main Street. The residents felt like the city listened to them and did something. They're useless. I mean, all you know is that the 90th percentile of people driving by are speeding. Is all you really learn from that side as well. you know, everyone is speeding. And the only person who's going the speed limit in that section is waiting to turn and is slowing down for it. Okay. Anyway, it is very temporary. It costs money. And these are nicer looking, but used to be when we pulled the trailer out, they didn't look very nice. And well, the trailer we had was pretty crappy looking. So it definitely didn't look nice for that. So that's some of the disadvantages of that. Really, the city literally put them up just to make the residents happy. And they knew they weren't going to do anything good. But they put them up there so the residents feel happy. I don't know if the residents feel happy or not, but maybe they stop complaining. And that's if the phone doesn't ring, that's a good day in a government office, right? No one's mad enough to call. We consider that a win. So the other thing we can do is restrict movements, and this does work better. And so this says you can't turn left here at certain times. I know this has a more effect on me. I'm like, well, I don't want to get caught. I don't want to get pulled over for that. Now, the police were more likely to pull you over for a moving violation like that than they would speed. Just it seems like, and it's a little bit bigger deal for that. And this will reduce cut through traffic. So you can do it by time of day. A lot of times near schools, there's no left turn or no parking. Those restricted movement pieces are by time for that, and that these work pretty well. Right. They're not self-enforcing. They do need to be enforced by the cops now and then. They need to show up and at least so the local people realize that, yeah, I remember. I saw people getting pulled over there and got caught for that. Or I read it in the paper back when we had papers. And so that will work then. Right. So if it does get enforced some and people realize that the town takes it seriously, they'll obey it. It will increase tripling, but that's not that's fine. We're not trying to reduce tripling. We actually are trying to increase it. So it takes a little bit longer for people to look at. So that'll cover it for today. Next time we're going to talk about the psychological traffic calming methods and also the physical ones.